According to brand new data, it appears that Donald Trump could potentially pull off the upset in Virginia. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back again with a new video, and today we have to talk about the 2024 presidential election because it appears that the Commonwealth of Virginia is trending towards Trump. Yeah, that's right. Despite what Democrats may claim about the current state of the race and how they're up by 50 points everywhere, despite what they claim, we have brand new data out of Virginia. Yeah, Virginia, not necessarily a Republican state, or hell, not even a purple state, at least on paper. This is a Democrat-leaning state in Virginia, right? It's not a state that you would expect Trump or hell, really any Republican to win in the year 2024. But in recent months, people have been thinking, well, maybe there's a chance here. Maybe Trump could pull off the upset. After all, Glenn Youngkin won in 2021, which, again, that's a governor's election. But many people in recent months, they began to wonder, could we see an upset out of Virginia? And while I've thought this entire time it was going to be a lot closer, I never thought in a million years that Trump had a chance at actually flipping Virginia. Well, I think my opinion on that, it's kind of changed. Now, I want to be clear that I am not saying Trump is going to flip Virginia, he's going to win it by 50 points. I am not saying that. But at some point, you cannot look at the early voting numbers and say to yourself, you know what, it's actually good news for Democrats. It is not. These numbers out of Virginia are absolutely horrific for the Democrat Party. Look at this. Early voting as of October 11th, below 60% Democrat. Republicans are roughly above 40% of the vote. Yeah. Democrats are not even cracking 60% of the early vote as of October 11th. Just a couple days ago, they were cracking 60%. But in recent days, Republicans have been gaining every single day. The last couple of days or so, they've been gaining. It's not a lot on paper, but every day it's like, okay, we gain 0.1%, then we gain another 0.1%. It keeps going. Every day they chip away at it. And now, Democrats are below 60% of the early vote. And for those that are wondering, compare that to 2021, 2022, or hell, even 2023. Look at this. Early voting for Democrats back then, it was 65% Democrats, 64% Democrat, just below 61.5% Democrat back in 2023. But even then, they were all above 60%. Yet the early voting as of now in Virginia is not even 60% Democrat. And we all know what happened in 2021, even in 2022. People forget that Republicans did fairly good in Virginia in 22 and even 23. But even back then, Republicans, they were only like 35% of the early vote as of now. And even 23, where they embraced early voting a little bit more, they still were not 40% of the vote. They were 38.5% of the early vote. Well, that changed. Right now, Republicans are above 40%. Listen, I'm not saying Trump is for sure going to win Virginia, but these numbers are absolutely horrific for Democrats. And like I said, compare this to just a couple days ago. I mean, yeah, look at this. On October 10th, Democrats were just like 0.01% below 60%. The day prior, they were above 60% of the vote. Like I said, Republicans, they have been slowly chipping away at the Democrat lead. Now, this doesn't mean that by election day it's going to be majority Republican. I'm not saying that. But the whole point is, Republicans, they're chipping away at this early vote lead that Democrats were banking on. And I know people are going to say, but Democrats are going to vote more on election day this year. Yes, that's true. Compared to 2020 and even 2022, you're going to see more Democrats vote on election day. Here's the problem. There's actually a bunch of problems. For starters, people are making it sound like it's 80% of Democrats voting on election day. It's not. There has been studies from NBC News, Axios. Yeah, NBC News admits that, Democrats roughly, the majority of Harris voters, they're voting before election day. Yeah, a majority. It's like 30% are actually voting on election day. So it's a little bit more than 22 or 2020, but it's not a 70% voting on election day. It's quite the opposite. The majority are still voting early. They're voting by mail, in person early, whatever. Point is, they're not voting on election day. And that makes this an even bigger problem for Democrats because they still should be having a huge lead in early voting. They should be. Because, yes, more of their voters are going to vote on election day. That doesn't mean that it's 70% of them. It's not. But their second big problem that not enough people are talking about is who these voters are. Because it's one thing to say, well, Democrats, they have a lot of people voting early. Okay, that's true. But who's actually voting? Of these Democrats, who are they? And you realize really quickly, this is a big problem because these are high propensity voters that are voting early for Democrats. What I mean by that is, these are people that vote in every single election. That means in every off-year election, every midterm, everything. They will vote every single year. All right? They vote in everything. And that means no matter what, whether they voted early, whether they were going to vote on election day, more than likely, they were going to vote. And you notice a big problem for Democrats? The vast majority of these early votes, they're 4 out of 4 voters. That means these people vote in every single election. Now, of course, the same thing's true with the Republican side, but look at the lower propensity voters, like 0 out of 4, 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4. That means these people, they might have voted 20 years ago, maybe. They might have voted 10 years ago, but that's it. Hell, some of them, they might have never voted. But this is the first time ever they are voting in an election. Right? There's a chunk of them that's the case. Now, that's not every single one of them. There are some new voters. I get that. But look at this. Democrats, of the low propensity voters, actually this was the day prior, the updated numbers right now of the low propensity voters, 8,000 of them are Republicans, while Democrats, they haven't even cracked 4,000 votes. What this means is two things. One, Democrats, they are banking on high propensity voters in the early vote, aka people that more than likely were going to vote on election day. In other words, they're just cannibalizing their election day vote, which is not a good thing for them at all. But the second thing is, Republicans, they're actually getting their low propensity voters out to vote. This was the big question we had. Could the Republican Party get these voters out to vote? This was the biggest question about this election, because if they did, it would help Trump a lot. It would make the election so much easier for him to win. If they didn't vote, well, Kamala Harris more than likely would have a much easier pathway to winning. But right now, despite Democrats having a big lead in early voting, on paper at least, they are getting crushed with low propensity voters. That's not good, because these low propensity voters, they don't vote. And you know what that means? There's a chance they don't vote on election day. So the fact that Republicans, they are actually getting these people out to vote's a big deal. Because two things. One, they already got their vote. No matter what happens, they already voted. But secondly, these voters, you don't have to worry about them not voting on election day. Democrats, they have to, because they're not getting their low propensity voters out to vote. Yes, they're getting their 4 out of 4 voters that voted every election no matter what. They're getting them out to vote. Problem is, well, these people are probably going to vote on election day no matter what. So you're not really gaining new voters. Republicans are. At that point, if Republicans keep up with these low propensity voters, there's a chance Trump could pull this off. Because at that point, if Democrats, if they're not getting their voters out to vote, it's still a long shot, but now begins to make sense why it's a possibility that Trump could maybe, just maybe, pull off the upset here. Because the Republican Party of Virginia, they're getting their voters, low propensity voters in particular, out to vote. It's not just, oh, they're getting their 4 out of 4 voters, which are high propensity voters, they're going to vote no matter what, and they're cannibalizing their election day vote, which happened in 23, by the way. That's why they failed to win the state legislature back then. they cannibalize their election day vote. This time it's different. They're actually getting these low propensity people out to vote. Not 4 out of 4 people, they're getting 0 out of 4, 1 out of 4, even 2 out of 4. These are people that are low propensity. They're not for sure going to vote. It's a big deal. Now, of course, early voting isn't everything. I understand that. Early voting, it can be misleading. Even though Republicans are doing great everywhere, not just Virginia. They're doing great in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, quite frankly, everywhere. There's not a single state where you could say Republicans are doing terrible in early voting. No, not a single state. But fine, early voting isn't everything. There are other reasons why I believe that, at the bare minimum, you're going to see Virginia have a trend to the right. All right, I'm not saying that means Trump's going to win the state, but I think at the bare minimum, it's fair to say that, yeah, right now, Trump is probably going to do 5 to 6 points better in Virginia, which compared to 2020, that would mean he would lose Virginia by like 4 to 5 points, which he might actually pull off the upset. Who knows? But let's just say for now, Trump is doing 4 to 5 points better in Virginia, which, by the way, there's been most polls, not every one of them, but most polls, they actually have Trump winning or losing Virginia by 3 to 4, 5 points, right? The majority of them actually show that. Some show Harris plus 12, but that's not going to happen. Point is, though, Trump is going to do better in Virginia for a bunch of reasons. For starters, you look at the demographics of Virginia, it would make a lot of sense why he would do better in the Commonwealth. It has a lot of African-American voters, and we all know Democrats have a big problem with these voters, especially young black men. They have a huge problem with them. They're in deep shit with these voters. Hell, you got Barack Obama running around begging these people to vote for Harris. That should tell you everything. And Virginia has a decent-sized African-American population. So do you really think that, despite every poll showing Trump doing way better with black voters across the board, do you really think, in a place like Virginia, you're going to magically see the black vote just not shift Republican? Really? You really are going to, if that's what you're banking on, that there's going to be no shift among African Americans, that's why Harris is going to win Virginia by 10. If that's your entire strategy, you might be in deep trouble. I mean, seriously, do you really believe that Harris is going to do so much better with black voters when in reality she's not? That's the biggest problem for Harris outside of early voting. The demographics of Virginia are actually fairly good for Trump. Not perfect, obviously. You got the government workers in Nova. That's a big problem. But you have a large African-American vote. You have a large Asian-American population. And these demographics, they're trending towards Trump. Now, does that mean it's going to be a 50-point shift? No. But even places like Virginia Beach, I really believe Trump is going to do way better here. Places like Suffolk. He's going to run it up in this part of the state. Now, will he win it by 15 points like Youngkin did? No. But that's his pathway to winning. If he wants to win Virginia, he has to run it up in Virginia Beach. He cannot get killed in Nova, like Loudoun County. He lost this county by 25 points. If he really wants to flip Virginia, you have to lose it by like 15 points. Even 20 points, you can make an argument that if he's doing so good in the rest of the state, maybe it's enough to flip it barely. But if he really wants to flip it, he cannot get killed in Loudoun. He cannot get killed in Fairfax. Like, look at this. A 41-point victory for Biden back in 2020 Fairfax. And nearly his entire margin of victory came from one county. Again, I guess it's possible that Harris is going to do better in the Nova part of the state. I get that. But, again, even these counties up here like Loudoun, there are demographics here that are trending towards Trump. It's not just white government workers and that's it. Yeah, that's a large chunk of the population, but it's not the entire county. There are other demographics that are trending towards Trump that live in these areas. Now, we just got to see what happens, but if Trump is really doing way better with African Americans, Asian Americans, etc., it could make Virginia way more closer than it should be. And if he pulls off the upset here, Democrats, well, they're in deep trouble because at that point, they're losing the presidency. There's no way in hell they can win. I mean, I guess they could flip Georgia, but at that point, if Trump is winning Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Do you really think he's going to lose Georgia? Do you really think he's going to lose a state like Arizona? And on top of that, we have polling data out of Maryland, which is a very Democrat state and just north of Virginia, where Trump, he's still losing the state, but instead of losing it by 33 points, he's down by 22, which is like an 11-point shift from 2020. And Maryland's very close to Virginia. It's not the same states, obviously, but if Maryland's 11 points more Republican than 2020, well, that's more than enough to flip the Commonwealth. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if Trump is doing way better in Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Delaware, do you really think he's going to just magically do the exact same, if not a little bit worse in Virginia? Maybe not enough to flip it, but at some point, it becomes apparent that the early voting's a disaster. Even polling in Virginia, outside of a couple of them, I mean, seriously, some of these polls had it Harris plus 15, not going to happen. But you have polls out of Maryland, out of New Jersey, out of New York, they're showing 10 to 15 point shifts. Again, I'm not going to say that there's going to be a 10-point shift in Virginia, but the more you look at it, suddenly it's not crazy to say that maybe it's a possibility that Trump could pull off the upset in Virginia. I know it sounds crazy, but that's what the numbers suggest right now. I still think Harris is the overwhelming favorite, but we're going to know come election day if these trends continue. If it continues becoming more and more Republican in early voting, they're in deep trouble. And if Democrats start spending in the Commonwealth, you know for sure, oh yeah, they have a big problem. They even admit that they're losing. If they're spending money in Virginia, they're in deep shit. But anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.